Hey there, today I want to show you a few drinking fountains. This is a drinking fountain in Fall River, Massachusetts that everybody hates. And this is a drinking fountain in Pawtucket, Rhode Island that everybody hates. And here's one in Rockville, Connecticut that everybody hates. And here's a picture of one that used to be in Boston, Massachusetts that everybody hated. And here's one from San Francisco. Everybody hated that one too. And here's another one just for you from Iowa. And wouldn't you know it, everybody hated that drinking fountain too. So, as you can probably guess, all 6 of those drinking fountains got something in common. And that is that they were all designed by the same guy, a dude named Henry Cogswell back in the late 1800s. And I wasn't lying when I said that people hate those fountains, or at least they used to back in the 19th century. And today, I'm here to tell you why. This is the story of one of the weirdest epidemics to ever hit the United States. The plague of the Henry Cogswell drinking fountains. So one of the first things that I should clue you in on here is just the incredible scale of this fountain epidemic. Like during the 1880s and 90s, Henry Cogswell erected at least 38 fountains all across the United States. Like everywhere from Brooklyn to California to Washington, D.C., like you name it. And he did it all in service of a single political movement. Temperance. See, Cogswell hated drinking and he hated alcohol, and after he made a good deal of money as a dentist in California, he just decided to devote the rest of his life to convincing others of the evils of beer and liquor. And in his mind, the best way to do that was to offer an alternative to alcohol. Water, and more specifically, cool, clean drinking water, which was something that a lot of people didn't exactly have easy access to back in the late 19th century. So Cogswell's thinking was just that a public drinking fountain might quench the thirst of those who would otherwise turn to beer on a hot summer's day. And so, in 1879, he started off on his crusade, hoping to eventually erect one fountain for every 100 saloons in the United States, which is a pretty lofty goal. His general strategy, at least at first, was to just kind of like cold call a whole bunch of various towns around the country and then offer to donate a free drinking fountain to them, which for the most part was a deal that places just didn't want to pass up, right? Like a free drinking fountain at no cost would be a great improvement to pretty much any locality, right? Like how could anybody ever hate a free gift like that? Well, very quickly, the towns began to realize that they were getting quite a lot more than they first thought with the Cogswell fountains. Like, it did not take long at all for local newspapers to start printing stuff like this in the Worcester Daily Spy. The new drinking fountain on Boston Common, which has been so ridiculed and abused, is not pretty. Or how about the San Francisco Call here saying that their fountain in San Francisco is an artistic nightmare that should be obliterated as soon as possible. Or here's a local newspaper calling their fountain a monstrosity, and here's another one begging for a cyclone or lightning to demolish their fountain, and here's another one saying that every single person that walks by their town's fountain wants to blow it up with dynamite. Like, it's all just crazy excessive stuff, right? So, of course, you're probably wondering, why do people hate these fountains so much? And the obvious answer is just, of course, that people didn't like that they were built in service of the temperance movement, right? Like it was a hot button, divisive issue at the time. And yeah, sure, that definitely played a part. But trust me when I tell you that the main reasons that people hated these fountains were a whole lot more specific and a whole lot funnier than just a political disagreement. Like, just to start, probably the biggest reason that people hated Henry Cogswell's fountains was that everybody thought they were just hideous, like absolute eyesores. See, most of the time when Henry Cogswell donated a fountain to a place, the town wouldn't even know what the fountain looked like until it showed up on a train coming into their city. So a lot of people, when they're unboxing the fountain and setting it up, are seeing it for the very first time, and they're kind of shocked when they see all these weird-looking, grotesque animals decorating the exterior. Like this horse on the Pawtucket fountain here, or the crazy-looking fish that you're supposed to drink out of in Boston, or like this entire zoo, pretty much, that's depicted on the Rockville fountain. And a lot of these sculptures were actually included because Cogswell wanted animals to be able to drink from the fountain too. Like the Pawtucket one, for example, says that the fountain is for man and beast, which is why we got this lower bowl here that's supposed to be for a horse to drink out of, or these super, super low dishes for dogs on the Fall River fountain. Apparently, nobody knew that any of that was going to be on the fountains, and they just really hated that they were there. Like, check out this article in the Boston Globe that is complaining that you basically just kind of got to, like, make out with the fish in the Boston fountain in order to get a drink out of it. But as off-putting as these animal sculptures were to a lot of people, nothing compared to what was yet to come. You see, the Pawtucket fountain here, for example, is actually a bit of an anomaly in the Cogswell fountain chronology. Most of Henry Cogswell's fountains did not look like this. Most of them had a very different sculpture on top of them instead of that heron up there. A very specific sculpture that absolutely drove people up the wall. Let me use this article that I found from Buffalo, New York in 1883 to show you what I'm talking about. So in this article, the journalist is describing what it's like to unpack a newly gifted fountain from Henry Cogswell. And as I go through this, keep in mind that the city had no idea what the fountain was going to look like before they got it. So here's the journalist walking through what the fountain looked like from bottom to top. The base of the fountain is a 6-foot-tall octagon that gradually slopes upward. And the second part on top of that is another smaller octagon that also shrinks upward towards the top. And the last piece of the fountain, on the very tippy top, is a life-size statue of Henry Cogswell holding a glass and a temperance pledge in his hands. So the city accepts this fountain from a mysterious benefactor only to discover that what they're actually receiving is a giant statue of the guy who's gifting it to them. And as you can probably guess, this drove people crazy. Very quickly, everyone identified these fountains as nothing more than vanity pieces, just pure advertisements. And Henry Cogswell actually tried to deny the similarity, saying that it wasn't a statue of him. It was actually just a statue of, and I quote, an ideal man, a perfect human that just happened to look exactly like him. But of course, nobody bought it. Obviously, that was meant to be Cogswell up there. Everybody knew from the moment they saw it. And now they're stuck with this giant statue of some completely random guy just smack dab in the middle of their downtown, right in front of City Hall. But the problems with the fountains actually went way beyond just the aesthetic issues too. A lot of times they just straight up didn't work. Let's take that fountain over in Fall River, Massachusetts, for example. That fountain was intended to gently pour out beautiful, clean water for the townsfolk to enjoy. It actually even included a sort of cooling system where ice that was inserted into the fountain was supposed to keep the water temperature down, even on really hot days, right? But in practice, it just did not work that way. Check this out. Here's a great article from 1909 where a guy who is in Fall River demonstrates firsthand how the fountain actually works. So he presses down on the button, and immediately the fountain shoots a jet of boiling water halfway out into the street. Boom, there it goes. Hardly the gentle, cool little stream that was advertised, right? And to make it even worse, this Fall River fountain was even shut down several times back in the day because it was found to be contaminated with some kind of horrible bacteria. So the city was promised some nice, cool little stream of clean, crisp water, and then what they got was a big hunk of rock shooting boiling poison water 20 feet out into the road. So from what I've read, a lot of the fountains kind of half worked like this. And because of it, a lot of them got shut down. Today, none of the Cogswell drinking fountains still actually emit any water. But on top of both the mechanical and artistic issues with the Cogswell fountains, one last tidbit really made people hate them. And that was their cost. See, Cogswell, despite framing the fountains as a pure gift of generosity, actually didn't pay for anything other than the fountain itself. So the town was completely on the hook for like installation and any additional materials that would be used on constructing the fountain, and upkeep and maintenance and rerouting water pipes to actually supply water to the fountain. All of that was the burden of the town that was getting the fountain. And, you know, to be fair, the town knew ahead of time that they were going to have to pay for all that stuff. It wasn't like Cogswell sprung it on them or anything. But still, the price of these things really started to balloon after all was said and done. Like, check out this cost summary that I found for the installation of a Cogswell fountain in the city of Rochester, New York. So you add all up these like material and labor costs, and you get $666.91, which comes out to like 20 grand in today's money, which, yeah, it's a lot cheaper than buying the whole fountain, but still, Rochester basically paid $20,000 in taxpayer money for a giant statue of a random dude that has absolutely nothing to do with their town. Oh yeah, and supposedly, Cogswell actually put all of the paperwork approving the fountain's erection in like a little box and then encased it inside of all of the fountains too, like presumably just as some kind of like built-in proof that he followed all the rules in getting the fountain put up. Like apparently deep in the fountain in Fall River here is a bunch of like legal documentation. And so you add all this stuff together, and it's pretty easy to see why people hated these fountains, right? And even a few famous people got in on the action. Like Mark Twain in 1885 famously said that the fountain in Rochester, New York looked putrid and decomposed, and that it was a blatant self-advertisement. And then he even recommended that the townsfolk of Rochester, New York band together in like a big mob and march up to the statue and throw ropes around it and tear it down. Which is exactly what they did a few months after Mark Twain wrote those words. A whole bunch of people at 5 a.m. threw ropes up on the statue and used horses and manpower to tear it down from the top of the fountain. And nobody said a word about who did it either. Like nobody got arrested. It was like the whole town was complicit in the fountain's removal. And they weren't the only ones to do it either. Like a fountain in San Francisco got pretty much the exact same treatment. A whole bunch of guys with ropes in the middle of the night marched on up to it and tore the statue down off the top. And again, the police didn't really do much about it. The only actual investigation that they conducted, as far as I can tell, was determining that the people who tore the statue down might have been fishermen because the rope that they left behind was kind of slimy. And while we're on the subject of fountain removal, you know that one that I keep showing you in Rockville, Connecticut? Believe it or not, that is actually a replica. The original fountain was torn down and thrown into a lake and then eventually melted down for scrap metal during World War II. And for the most part, that is just kind of how the story of the Cogswell fountains end. You know, after enough newspapers reported on these things, cities around the country just sort of got the picture of what accepting a Cogswell fountain entailed. And eventually towns like Philadelphia just started to respectfully but firmly decline Cogswell's offer for a fountain. And then Cogswell himself died in 1900, and over time, almost all of his fountains were either torn down or just removed by the cities, and he wasn't there to replenish them. So if you ever find yourself in Pawtucket or Fall River or any of the other places that are still lucky enough to have a Cogswell fountain up, then do yourself a favor and go take a visit to an endangered species. You know, one of the last few relics from one of the weirdest little blips in American history. Because who knows how long it's going to be before the last one finally falls and they'll be gone forever. Thank you for watching.